All right, today we're going to talk about Chapter 13, which deals with real estate taxes and some other liens that we're going to have. If you remember back, we talked about a lien in the previous chapter was an encumbrance. It puts a condition on your property, and one of the encumbrances was an encumbrance, like an easement, and I told you there are monetary liens or monetary encumbrances, which are liens. That's what we're going to deal with today. Specifically, taxes. Taxes are a big one where the creditor or the court can actually put a claim against someone's property. So we're going to talk about the different types of liens that there are. We're going to talk about taxes and special assessments, and we're also going to talk about real property liens and judgments and all kinds of other good stuff. So there on page 222, today we're going to talk about a lien. A lien is a future interest in property. It is not an actual ownership. It's a future ownership. And as long as someone does what they're supposed to do, the liens never really materialize. It is just an interest in someone's property because they owe you money for some reason. So they are a security against or for the borrower. It represents an interest in ownership. You probably have, if you own property currently here in Indiana, you probably have at least 2 liens, maybe more, and we'll find out and talk about the different kinds. All right? So there is a chart on page 223 that basically I'm going to reproduce, and as we go through the chart, you'll see how these play out. So the very first part of the lien I want to talk about is this thing called a specific lien. A specific lien, sometimes you hear it called in the legal world in rem, which means against the thing. All right, so this specific lien is against the property. It's not against you personally. It's against the property. It's specific because everybody's real property has their own liens. The other key to a specific is it only attaches to real property. All right? So a specific lien is specific to my house. Your specific lien is specific to your house. They have nothing to do with each other. That's where the term comes from. And it only attaches to real property. My house, my log cabin down at the lake, whatever, my vacant land out in the sticks, all right? So it's specific in nature, meaning that it only attaches to real property. The other side of that coin is called a general lien. Not the generally, the general lien. Yes? It would also attach to a timeshare. Right. Or it could. Sometimes you hear the general called in persona, meaning it attaches to you. It attaches to both real and personal property. So a general lien would attach to your house, but it would also attach to your person, your kids, your basketball goal, your silverware, anything that you have. All right? It goes against everything. We'll talk about general liens in just a second. They come in flavors. Voluntary, meaning you have chosen to go out and put this lien on your property. And involuntary, meaning someone else has done it to you. Now, if you look at that chart, and I'm going to jump to this chart here. There's also a third kind of lien on that chart. It's called a vendor's lien. Vendor's lien has its own category because it's actually both. Both meaning voluntary and involuntary. You have chosen to do something, you messed up, now you force someone else to act. Okay? What would be a good, well, let's not do it that way. In the voluntary, the value of the lien has been determined to be of two ways. It is either equitable. What does equitable mean? By value, dollar, hence the word equity. If you're really good at the English language, you also know that equitable means fair. So what's fair? You borrowed $100,000, guess what the lien's going to be? $100,000, that's fair, right? You cannot borrow $1 million on a $100,000 house, not legally. That's not fair. It's not equitable. Then in some cases, there is a statutory value. What does statutory mean? A law or a rule. There's some law or rule. All right? Now, what I like to do underneath the voluntary section, I have written an equitable and the word statutory. On the chart view at home, that's not there. It would be right in this area here. Because they don't have it on the chart, because there's no such thing as a statutory, voluntary anything. Everybody understand that? There's no such thing as a voluntary law. So they don't put the statutory and the voluntary underneath. They don't put the statutory and the equitable under voluntary. I do so that you can see the pattern here in a minute because they all three have them. So equitable would mean what's fair or money. Give me an example of an equitable, voluntary, specific lien. Something that is fair based on money. You chose to do it, and it's against your one specific piece of real estate. Okay, when you go to the bank and ask for a loan, it's a better word for that. What do we call it? The mortgage. Right? That makes sense. Equitable, meaning it's based on the value of your house, so they loan you only what's fair. It's voluntary, meaning that you guys chose to have a mortgage. There's no law that says you have to have a mortgage. If you can pay cash, pay cash. So it's voluntary. Now, for most of us, it's mandatory that we get a loan, but the law doesn't say that. All right? And it's specific because the mortgage on my property has nothing to do with the mortgage on Singh's property, even though we're next door neighbors. It's specific against my property. Now, let me give you a hint on the exam. Remember I told you way back long ago that they're going to ask you two questions inside of one? This is an example of how they would do it. Rather than say a person takes a mortgage, tell me how much the mortgage is, and you do some math to calculate it. They're going to say if a person takes an equitable, voluntary, specific lien, calculate the value. So you're going to need to know what an equitable, voluntary, specific lien is before you can even do the math. That's a great example of how the test, you think, well, it's one question. Well, it's really two. Because if you don't know what an equitable, voluntary, specific lien is, you can't solve the problem, which is a math problem. So be prepared for something like equitable, voluntary, specific lien, rather than them say a mortgage. They're going to want to make sure that you understand that. Now, there is no statutory, I told you that, because there's no such thing as a statutory law. Under the involuntary, there are two values. One of them is, guess what? Equitable. The other, statutory. What is a statutory, involuntary, specific lien? A law that someone else has chose to do to you against your specific piece of property. Come on. Real estate taxes. Real estate taxes. It's a law. It's involuntary. It's specific lien. So your real estate taxes are a statutory, involuntary, specific lien. There is equitable, involuntary, specific liens we won't get into in this course. Credit cards, things like that. Credit card comes after you, something to that effect. Okay? There is a third classification. It's called a vendor's lien. A vendor's lien is separate because it's both. It's something you have chosen to do. You've decided to not pay for it, but yet you have forced someone else to act. Once again, it comes in two values. Guess what they are? Equitable and statutory. Now you see why I put equitable and statutory under voluntary, just so you can see there's a pattern. Just remember, there's no such thing as statutory voluntary. So there's a pattern to this. What is a equitable vendor's lien? Have you guys ever heard of a mechanic's lien? A mechanic's lien is someone that you have voluntarily chosen to come out and work on your property. Then you didn't pay for it. So they had to take you to court and sue you for the amount of money. All right? Now, the word mechanic is a trick word here. Most of us think of the word mechanic like a car mechanic, right? A mechanic to the real estate world is anybody that betters your property. So theoretically, you have your lawn care treated and you don't pay Kim Lawn or True Green and they sue you, that's a mechanic's lien. You hire your HVAC company to fix your furnace, you don't pay them, that's a mechanic's lien. You hire a roofer to put a new roofer on, you don't pay them, they sue you, that's a mechanic's lien. So the word mechanic here is a general term. It is equitable because it is based on some amount of money or fair. If the new furnace was 10 grand, you didn't pay them, they're going to sue you for 10 grand. That's what's fair. That's equitable. So an equitable vendor-specific lien would be a mechanic's lien. Anybody in here own a small business like this? Lawn care, HVAC, plumbing. Have you ever filed mechanic's liens? Really? Yeah. Got all your money all the time?
We've had issues with it, but it's been small amounts, like $30.
Oh, so you just send Guido over? Yeah. I'm here to collect. There is a statutory vendor's specific lien. Let's see if we can come up with this. It's a law that you have chosen to follow. That's not really the best way to say that. It's a law that you know about. You didn't follow the law and you forced someone else to put a lien on your property. They've become a real big pain in the butt here lately with a lot of real estate transactions. How about a homeowners association? It's not equitable, meaning it's not based on the value of your home. That's why it's not equitable. You guys signed an agreement that says, yes, I'll be part of the homeowners association, and they said, okay, everybody pays $125 a year, or whatever number it is. Doesn't matter if you have a $180,000 home or $120,000. It's not based on the value of your property. It was a rule they came up with. Here's what you pay. Everybody pays it. If you fail to pay it, they will go and put a lien on your property. Okay? So it's a statutory vendor's lien. Statutory vendor's lien. That's what those are. So make sure you understand voluntary, involuntary, and a vendor. It's specific, meaning it's attributable to just one piece of property and such. All right? Now, we will finish the other side of that graph here in just a minute with general, because I want to still deal with a bunch of stuff here on this specific lien.